right, let's go, Mr. George Finney here in a Lambo in Dallas. What's going on?
What's up? I've never been in a Lambo before, and I've never thought of driving a Lambo in the rain. So
well, this is my first time
this
too.
will be exciting.
In the rain. I thought Dallas was not supposed to be that rainy for some reason, but I guess this time it is.
You know what they say in Texas is if you don't like the weather, just wait.
It'll get better.
Yeah.
Look at this place though. It's pretty nice. There's a cop over there. I'm pretty sure they're gonna kind of just stop us over, pull us over at some point.
Well, you picked a yellow Lambo. I mean, obviously, that gets people's attention.
So man, I'm here. We met literally at the place that we met right now, which is pretty awesome. But you got to tell me, you wrote this book on zero trust, right?
Yeah.
But it's really not about zero trust, is it? It's really about everything cyber. So tell me about it. Tell everyone.
So it's called Project Zero Trust. So if you're familiar with Phoenix Project or some of the other books, it's kind of like a story. Mm-hmm. So you get to follow characters, and I wrote it that way on purpose, right? Because everybody in IT needs to play a role in zero trust.
Right.
So like CISO's motto is see yourself in cyber, right? I wanted to literally give people away. You're a network engineer, you're a help desk person, you're a project manager, you're a developer. Everybody's got to have that person that they can see themselves playing that role. And when you write a book, they always say, show, don't tell.
Right.
Right. And maybe, I don't know that we do a good job of that in security, but Project Zero Trust was my attempt at not just giving newbies a way into security and seeing the big picture, but hopefully seasoned practitioners who've been in the industry a long time can also get something out of it.
Learn something new, do something different, but makes sense. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I've found, at least I have to be honest here, I didn't read the whole book, but what I found from what I understood is that you actually get a chance to learn something about every aspect of cyber.
Exactly. We're so specialized in security now, right? If you get your first job in security, you might only work on one tool for
you might just
years.
only work on the firewall first. You might only work on endpoint, which is different. And this area, I mean, again, for everyone that hasn't seen it yet, it's really cool because it actually tells you, hey, this is like a series of things that you need to look at, and then it applies that towards standards.
Exactly.
Which probably, to be fair, it's like you don't really realize that until you actually get into the details of it. At first you're like, oh, it's yet another zero trust thingy-majiggy, but actually it's more just like, hey, this is what you should think about if you're like a CISO into cyber, right? I mean, that's the whole idea.
Well, a lot of people, when they think about zero trust, they think, it's just identity, or they think it's just microsegmentation.
Right.
Everybody has their different angle, and I mean, I talked to one CISO that thought like SD-WAN was zero trust. I'm like, hang on, like zero trust is a strategy, right?
Right.
Who owns strategy for cybersecurity organizations, for businesses? It's the CISO.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Zero trust is our thing, and we've got to take it back from all of the marketers who don't really know much about security, and they're just trying to throw their narrow thing at you as though it's going to be the silver bullet to solve all our problems. I think about it differently, right? It's the big picture, and everything under that are tactics that I deploy as needed for the different areas.
But I think that you said something interesting where like, hey, we got to get away from like the marketing using this as like a way of selling to people. Somehow through whatever reasons, these ideas, these concepts, like, hey, I have a zero trust project, I have a SASE project, for example, I have an EDR or EPP project. Like, that's how people kind of define it, right? But what also is important is that, like, what you said secondly, which is that we need those product people and product marketing people to really live in the life of a CISO, right? Otherwise, you're just kind of like sitting there and you're not actually thinking about how does this person deal with this every day.
Exactly. I think truth in advertising, right, is a big thing with me. And I mean, it can fit into your zero trust strategy, whatever your product is. But you don't have to sell it as though it's the miracle cure. Right? I mean, we are good at sniffing out BS when it comes to security.
Fair.
And I think you've got to take that different angle. And I mean, we do need tools to be able to get the job done. and I think really understanding how it fits into the big picture is really important.
But then when you look at this stuff and like you said, it's kind of marketing buzzwordy, how do you kind of translate that to, okay, well, this is what the reality is? Because you have to do that every day as your job. Because your day job is not, I mean, yes, you've written the books and you've like kind of trying to impart knowledge on people, but there's also a practical approach to it as well.
You know, I'll take a step back for a second, right? When you're a CIO,
Yeah.
Your job is to make things work, right?
Right.
And, you know, I started out my career as a network engineer, right? You get the network working, and then you back away slowly,
Yeah.
don't touch it, but you have no idea how people are using it, right? You don't care how people use the network. You don't know about the nitty-gritty details of how the business operates.
Right.
When you're in security, you have to understand how everything in the business works. You know, which I think requires more of us in security, and I think
it's more detailed knowledge.
Exactly, and I think, you know, again, you have to acknowledge that that insight is something that you don't get from tools. You have to get that through talking with other humans in your organization, figuring out the ins and outs.
Like what's happening?
You know,
how's it working?
Exactly. What makes your unique organization tick? Like, how, you know, what's the drivers there, and how do you help protect those things and enable those things?
I mean, I feel like so much of cyber is about getting into the details in so many ways, right? Because if you don't do that, like sometimes people say to you, I'm sure it's like, well, Finney, like, why are you looking into like this thing or that thing? And it's like, well, this is important because then how am I going to know how to secure it if I don't understand it?
Or if I don't even know that it exists.
Exactly.
I mean,
another thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's why sometimes it gets a bad rap because they're like, oh, it's like, just let us deal with this. We're going to be fine. It's like, well, I kind of have to like know about it, then I can figure it out, right? I can't really figure it out if I don't even know that it exists.
You know, so much of that is just discovery, right? You know, I mean, it's incredible how much. I mean, I've been at my organization for over 20 years now.
Right.
So
yeah, which is really amazing, by the way. Congratulations on 2 decades.
You know, I like to say I worked my way up from the email room, you know, like...
Yeah, the email room, not the mail room, but
exactly.
The email room. Dude, that's so amazing, actually. In fact, my last guest was from United Talent Agency, so he was in the mail room.
Nice. You know, man, you know, it takes time.
Yeah,
and you know, building relationships, you know...
Take a quick UE here.
You know, all of those things are, you know, you take that for granted, but, you know, one of the challenges with our industry is the volume of change. I think it's forcing us to move quickly between roles, right? You know, the average CISO, right, they say the tenure's 2 years.
You know, it's like, that's short, by the way.
Oh, you know, and, you know, with CIOs it's longer, with CFOs it's longer. And I think that'll change over time.
But why do you think it's 2 years? Because people are jumping, or because they're getting fired?
You know, I don't see that many CISOs, you know, getting the axe.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, some do, and that's unfortunate. But oh my gosh, I mean, I think to advance in your career, right? We all want to do that. I think we're in a place as CISOs, right, to get that raise that we want, or to get more team members, to get more responsibility, to work at a bigger organization, right? That's a natural progression of anyone's career.
Yeah, you kind of want to like have a new challenge, for example. But I guess in some ways it's weird for me, right? Because when I'm in product, if I'm at a place for, you know, minimum is 2 years. So for me, a year would be weird. Because it means it didn't work out or something. So like, what would it be that doesn't work out? Because you've been here for 20 years. So what did work out, I guess, at SMU?
Honestly, I will say some of the worst bosses I had in my career have been at SMU, and some of the best.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's the number one thing, right? Having someone who you report to that you believe in.
That's true.
And you know, a lot of us report to CIOs. That's kind of a challenging relationship sometimes, because the CIOs are in a bad position in some ways, because they have to prioritize other things other than security.
Yeah, it's kind of like a little bit of a tension, but also they are also beginning to understand the value and the reasons why they have to be about security, right?
I mean, I will say, you know, post the SEC you know, changes this year, you know, our board is asking better questions.
Oh yeah.
They're you know, for really the first time, and so you know, again, I think just like the role of the CIO matured over time, you know, I think the same process is happening with CISOs, and you know, we're getting better, we're getting more maturity. there are so many more challenges, and the pace of change is faster. So, gosh, I don't know exactly what's driving it, but I think it's important for us to ask for what we need right out of the gate, so we can stay longer, right? If you know that you're going to get a 50% raise by leaving in 2 years, oh my gosh, like as employers, you have to understand the competitive
there's
market.
a competitive market. I mean, it's fair market comp, but I do believe in what you said earlier, because for me at least, so much of my learnings came directly from these managers, right? Like, I mean, for example, I always reference Gary, Nico, Pop, folks like Patrick Gardner. I mean, even Javed, like all these guys, and a lot of them have gone on to all these other worlds and everything. And they're doing different things as well. But I'll always remember, like, Patrick, for example. This guy, he ran endpoint. He was at Symantec for 20 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he learned so much. So he was able to impart that knowledge. And I think that's like the best part of being a manager. Not necessarily that you have all the knowledge of all time, but you should be able to help someone grow. And maybe that's about just letting them take a course or paying for them to take a course, for example.
I hear so many stories where organizations aren't willing to invest in their training of their employees. And man, I in my very, very beginning of my career, I couldn't get my employers to invest in me. So I'm mostly self-taught, right? I went out and paid for my own certifications.
Oh, interesting. So you have to pay for that yourself.
I had to pay for that myself. I had to get my CISO, or
But I guess the real question: have you made a
CCNP.
difference at SMU now with your team?
This is my mission in life.
Yeah.
I want to enable the next generation of cybersecurity leaders.
Right.
And that happens. The only way that happens is if you take the time to mentor them, if you invest in them in training,
right.
all of those good habits that you learn over the years. Let's not make the next generation learn the hard way. We know we need more people in security. Let's make it more approachable. Let's bring people in that wouldn't necessarily think of being in security otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so many people could be in it or learn from it or learn from people like you, but they don't have that opportunity to sometimes. And I think that by you helping them or at least showing them what to do, that is huge.
I mean, I've paid for our help desk staff to go get security certs. I've offered CISSP training to network engineers or DBAs.
Well, so you help all of them. Okay,
I help everyone.
Very non-discriminatory. You're like everyone.
I mean, we say in the industry, security is everyone's job.
Right.
Right. If we say that and we don't back it up with actually helping people, give them the tools and the capabilities to do that job, we're failing as leaders.
Fair. I mean, it's interesting because we, like, going back to that whole idea, is that from a PM or from a kind of a vendor perspective, just seeing and believing what does the CISO have to actually go through. I got to be honest with you, until I had this job at Dope, I didn't really talk to as many CISOs as I do now. I talk to way more, and I've learned so much. I mean, that's the whole reason why I even do this whole CISOs in cars is because of, like, we get a chance to talk about something. I get to learn something new. Last time just last week actually, that's coming out, is the guy was like, look, Kunal, you have to think about being more effective and also, in a way, doing less with less. You don't always get the opportunity to do more with more. You don't have unlimited budgets, and less with more is also a little, it's a little dicey, let's call it. And so I'm just curious about your thoughts. Like, what is the one thing you would teach someone if you were like, hey, you're going to be a CISO one day? Like, what would you say you should do?
When I started in security, don't do this. This is learning the hard way. But I specifically, was in an environment where, it was play your cards close to the vest. Don't share any information. Don't talk about it. It was a black box. My CIO at the time specifically said, security can't be a black box anymore. Let's figure this out.
Got it. So that was from him.
That's from him. And, I think embracing that, right, the most important part of cybersecurity as a whole is community, right? Think about the ISACs. Think about ISAOs across think about how important it is, information sharing is, because the bad guys are incentivized to share intel.
Yeah, and the good guys should be also as well.
And I think of the challenges that we face that are most pressing today. are the ones that I think attack that community, right? In any time we discourage people from sharing their lessons learned, right? From being able to help the community learn from our collective, mistakes or challenges or vulnerabilities or threats, whatever it is, those are challenges to it, right? I think about, the SEC, again, I think long term, this is going to have a beneficial impact on our industry. But in the short term, when there's a lack of guidance and it feels very confrontational, right? I mean, lawyers think as in the adversarial model, right? I am a lawyer as well. So I'll also have worked at the SEC in an internship while I'm in law school. Oh my gosh, I mean, we can't litigate these things, like we've done in the past, via press release, right? And I think that's the frustration that we have. We need to get that seat at the table and have a greater voice, but at the same time, we've got to collaborate with one another in the community. And if CISOs like me aren't willing to come on shows like this to talk about the issues that we have, right? Because we know that lawyers somewhere are going to be looking at what we say in these conversations, right? Our whole community is going to be destroyed, right? That's the most important thing, right? When the whole reason that we come together as a species, as humans, is for mutual protection. It's a part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs as the foundation of helping people live up to their full potential.
And they can, right? If you're all coming together. I mean, one thing I've noticed is, every company has different sizes and shapes of issues, right? And not everything is perfect. It's not a perfect world scenario, right? For example, you can't use everything that you ever wanted to use multiple times. We can't build everything under the sun either, right? And so I think everything you're saying makes so much sense, because it's how do I, as a security practitioner, actually do what's best for my company? And that's where you learn from other people. For example, someone's 200 people, they're well, look, you're 100 people at the company, go in, use this, use that, do this kind of practice. For example, I always tell people, if you're a startup, there's nothing, you should at least have single sign-on in place everywhere. And if you're a startup, you can definitely do that. In some companies, you can't. Let's be real, right? If you're in a retail, you may not be able to have two-factor authentication everywhere.
It's so much harder with legacy applications, but you're right, with a startup, there's no excuse.
Yeah, and so, if you're a startup, really, you can just have SSO from Google or from Azure, and you're in business. That's it. And especially because those are small, things that we can educate people about, right? If GitHub can do two-factor authentication, shout out to them, because they actually did it really well, then we can too, right, as a company, right? As much as you can, at least.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to give a shout out to all of the other security leaders that have been willing to support me over the last several years, right? For all of the books that I've written, right? Not just for Project Zero Trust, but the book before that, Well Aware, it won the Book of the Year award. It's kind of like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Cybersecurity. But for both of those books, I didn't want to just tell my story from my unique perspective. I interviewed.
You interviewed a lot of people?
A ton of other people. And I mean, that helped so much with the formation of the books. But also at the same time, oh my gosh, it was so hard, because some of the folks that had amazing stories to share were man, my company has me under NDA. I talked to my PR department, they won't let me go on the record. Whatever it was, I mean, again, those things are preventing us from helping the next generation. And
it's so true.
Again, it's such a massive, important part of our industry.
I agree with that for sure, because when we look at everyone, unless you share the knowledge, you won't know. By the way, here's our boys at Palo Alto. Not actually in Palo Alto, by the way. They're actually, but this is something that we learn a lot from, is even each other, and even when it comes from a development perspective, there's a lot of knowledge sharing that ends up coming into place that we even do as well. For example, in Dope, we release templates, cloud templates, to help people get up and running more quickly. We write blogs, our engineers write blogs to help. Hey, can you learn something new? It's a little more difficult, maybe, when say, hey, there's a breach, here's how we dealt with it, and this is what you could do to help prevent yourself in the future.
I mean, I lean so heavily on the security vendor community in particular, because those blogs,
they're helpful.
particularly the research blogs from, Unit42, Palo, right?
Yeah, they do a great job.
I mean, even, Kaspersky, which, people have their feelings because it's a Russian company, but, when they released the thing just a few weeks ago that talked about the backdoor in iPhones, right? That they'd been working on for 5 years. Who else is going to have the time to invest in really understanding the security of tools like that, other than the security vendor community?
Yeah, because they're the ones that have dedicated people that are going in and doing this. I mean, like, I guess Palo's a great example, but there's every company has this, is that, hey, they'll have security researchers that are their job every day is to help do the research rather than like product focused research,
right.
which is kind of cool. Obviously, in my own zone, I would say like that's a goal at some point, probably in the future. But when I look at all of the stuff that you're doing, every single, like whether it's the books or everything like that, like what's the number one capability or product that you've used that you're like, yo, this is really good? I mean, like, because I'm just curious, right? Like, which one did you actually what made you enjoy it?
I mean, I have to say,
besides dope, obviously.
Well, we'll talk about that in another podcast. But, man, I think I've been as a strategy, as a small organization, right? You have to be a little bit more nimble. We don't have the budget that a Fortune 10 company can have. We've invested in a lot of startups, so this has been part of my strategy. Is I get better pricing, I get better functionality by going with these innovative companies.
Right.
So we were an early adopter with Palo. We're an early adopter on the EDR bandwagon. I think that was really transformative. So
which one is your favorite EDR?
Give
them the shout out.
We started off with Cylance back in the day. Circa 2015, which was really early.
I'm a big fan of Cylance, by the way.
I think obviously we've moved on since then. But overnight, we went from having 20% of our endpoints compromised every year. 20%.
To like zero.
Right, to like zero.
Yeah.
I mean, not exaggerating.
I told this to someone once because they were like, Kunal, like, why did you choose to do this? And I was like, look, it's very simple. Like, there was a malware problem, and Cylance made that malware problem go away.
And there are better products out there today, certainly.
Of course,
like
right? But that was their whole pitch at the beginning, right?
And that moment allowed us as a security team to change our focus, to get out of firefighting mode, to get into the mode of doing new innovative things that have layered on additional controls that have allowed us to really actually embrace zero trust and do it well, versus getting in this day-to-day firefighting mode where we can't ever take a step back and think strategically.
That's what Sheila, she was one of, like, 'cause I learned from a lot of sales reps too, right? So she was at Cylance. She actually lives in Houston, actually. I call her the queen of Houston because she knows everyone there, every CISO you could ever imagine. And so she was like Blue Code and also Symantec and so on, and McAfee as well for like years and years. And what Sheila used to say is like, Kunal, it's like, it was really interesting because you actually fixed a problem people were having.
Yeah.
And for me, like, that stuck with me every single day because, like, people say, oh, well, why did you do a secure web gateway? And I'm like, well, like, have you talked to some of these security engineers? The craziness they have to go through when, like, their internet doesn't work or half the population can't access what they need to access. It's insane. And it all comes down to the fact that you're rerouting the internet traffic from your device to a data center. And guess what? It's like not that different from what you just mentioned from Cylance, right? You're like, look, 20% of the company products endpoints had malware. Guess what? Like, you put this in place, gets rid of it. Same thing. You put dope in place, guess what? Gets rid of those outages, gets rid of those reliability and performance problems.
I think for too long our industry has seen security as a trade-off, right? It's security or productivity, security or performance. And I think the modern technologies today are challenging that assumption, right? I think we can have both security and performance. We can have both security and innovation at the same time. And actually, security empowers innovation, right? You set that up so that we can get even better. This is why I've embraced startups in particular, because that allows me to kind of skip a generation. And
skip a generation, go to the next gen.
Well, you didn't ask what vendors I hate, but
I'm about to. By the way, what vendors do you hate?
I mean, I'm going to call Cisco out.
Yeah.
I mean, we were using an innovative, secure email security product, and they this summer they killed the product. They just outright killed it.
Which one is it?
You're familiar with Armor Blocks?
Oh.
They're like an email add-on on.
Oh,
over on
right,
top.
right. Yeah, they did EOL it, right?
Really good product, and they just acquired the company for the talent, which is great, good for them. I'm happy for all the people that made out, but man, I mean, it really did leave the industry as a whole with a gap.
Yeah.
I think about how Cisco helps fund Shadow Server, and they talked about defunding Shadow Server Foundation, which helps small businesses help identify their things. Cisco, I'm talking trash about Cisco.
That's
Maybe you guys
okay.
should
I
call
won't
me.
tell
but,
anyone.
No. I mean, they raised the price on one of their products by 10x.
Yeah, that's kind of
that's
kind of much.
I mean, I'm not exaggerating.
I get the idea. I get the idea of like the whole, hey, let's this is a business at the end of the day. But what I don't appreciate is like, look, I mean, if you're gonna do a 10x price increase, that's a little much.
So I think again their customer base isn't me.
Yeah.
When you think about the Broadcom acquisitions,
Right, they're for the Fortune 100.
Exactly, and I mean, they're making money, but they're not solving the worldwide problem of cybersecurity.
Right.
And man, half the businesses in the country are small businesses.
And I think like so much of, I mean, you're completely right. Like there is a level of mainstream nature to things versus top tier, super specific for big, very large enterprise, which like even for my own intents and purposes, it's just not what I believe in when it comes to building a company. Yeah. I believe that every company, if you're going to build something, like if I'm going to build something, not everyone, if I'm going to build something, it has to be mainstream.
Yeah.
It has to be mainstream. It has to be something that you could use, something that has 50 people could use, somebody that has 10,000 people could use, because then it's most effective. Yeah. Otherwise, it's very difficult for the company to survive, and then it gets acquired, right? That's the whole thing.
Yeah, and again,
higher goes out of business, right?
Well, I mean, as universities, we're often a proving ground for companies.
Correct.
And
Duo is a great example, by the way.
Duo is a great example, and again, I fully expect the same thing to happen with Duo, where prices go up, and that'll force us.
Oh yeah, that's also Cisco acquisition.
To go some right. Yeah. So I mean.
But do you still use Duo?
No comment. I can't talk about our current OPSEC, but. It is something that I worry about in the industry. Is
I mean, I think the consolidation of MFA and SSO, right? I mean, that's something that like had happened back in 2016, 17. So I mean, just curious. The reason I was asking is like who actually uses just two-factor versus using two-factor plus SSO combined solution.
I think again there's some innovative things out there, but Duo, back 5, 6, 7 years ago. They were one of the only players, whereas today,
correct.
You will just come with your Microsoft site license.
Yeah, I mean that, or if you're using even a OneLogin or Okta or whatever you're using, they'll have the two-factor there. You don't really have to purchase a separate. By the way, I was the product manager for Symantec VIP, so the RSA token replacement, the OG one.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, I think knowing what I know now, I think there was a big opportunity to really get into this space, and that was in 2013, right? Ping and Okta were like killing it, right?
Yeah.
And now it's really become, I've seen most companies either use Okta or they use Azure AD.
Yeah.
And then sometimes people supplement that with like identity orchestration, kind of deprovisioning, provisioning, just-in-time access stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff around that as well. But yeah, man, I mean, I think it's so interesting to see like your knowledge and how you thought about all this stuff, right? Love to hear like what do you want people that are going to watch this to know? Like, what should they know?
I mean, I honestly, I've said this, a bunch of times already, but people are the most important part of security. Right. It's why we do what we do. It's how we do what we do. And I think it's easy for us as security people, right? We're the spooks, right? Nobody really understands what we do. It's easy for us to gravitate away from people because technology is easier. I can just click a bunch of buttons and poof, I've got a secure company. Well, actually, I think we've got to include the humans in that process. We've got to enable them. We've got to build relationships. That's how security works.
Of course. And I mean, this is where we first met at the Whiskey Cake. So thank you so much. And you're looking super fly in the dope security jacket, by the way.
You know, I like to say every day is game day in cybersecurity, right? You know, when you see those NFL players coming on the field,
Yeah, you got
they're dressed to the
the
nines.
swag, the passion, the design. It needs to be there.
It's the mindset, right? It's going into that with, you know, I'm gonna win the day, and you know, being that preparedness that we bring every day, we have to be there because we never know what's gonna happen.
Exactly. And like, I mean, if we're not there with like excitement to be able to do what we're trying to do, then what's the point?
Heck yeah.
But yeah, man, thank you so much for
Dude,
coming in.
thanks for having me.
It's super fun.
Heck yeah.
See you next time.